It's a proven business model, and that's the key to it. Yeah. It's a proven business model with a track record. You can go to a bank and get funding against it.
Business of Architecture UK, episode 29. Hello and welcome, Architect Nation. This is the podcast for architects where you'll discover tips, strategies and secrets for running an impactful and profitable design practice. Hello and welcome to the Business of Architecture. Ryan Willard here. And this week I did a long slog drive all the way up to Manchester, which was it took me about 5 hours in the rain, but it was well worth the drive because I got to meet some amazing people up there and spend my day talking about the thing I love most, which is business and architecture. And this interview is one of those conversations with an incredible lady called Lisa Raynes. Now, Lisa established her own architecture practice back in 2009. She's had a lot of experience in larger practices as well. And she really kind of mastered the art of solo practitioner and small practice and has kind of developed her own niche in serving a particular kind of demographic of, extension work and residential work, and has developed a business that's really suited her lifestyle as a working mother. Now, what's really amazing about this is that she's kind of embodied marketing and entrepreneurship and has franchised this architectural practice as a fully working, systematized business that she's now opening up around the country and helping and supporting other architects who want to have a similar sort of freedom in their lifestyle to establish their own architectural practice without having to go through that kind of horrendous learning curve that many of us architects go through, because she's already got some fully developed systems. So this is a really interesting interview and a totally unique business model. Hello and welcome to the Business of Architecture UK. I'm your host, Ryan Willard. And today I'm all the way in Manchester and I'm very excited to be talking with Lisa Raynes. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Ryan.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, as I understand, you're an architect. You have set up your own company. Originally it was Raynes Architecture.
Yeah.
And now you've begun a franchise architecture company called Pride Road.
Yes, so that's right.
I find this concept quite fascinating and it's really, really innovative, and it's great to see architects entering into the world of franchising. So how did it begin? How did you come across this idea and how does it work?
Right. Oh, it's a long story. So I'm an architect with 20 years experience.
Yeah.
I sort of went to the Bartlett. I qualified back in about 98. I've worked in New York. I've worked for Ian Simpson, Urban Splash. And I started building a nice CV, nice career. But then when kind of kids came along, my career kind of came to a bit of a halt. I went part-time, found it was hard to maintain a job working part-time, ended up being made redundant. My career kind of started to falter when I went off and had kids. I started to find my peers being promoted above me. Working part-time was tricky. And eventually I was I've been made redundant a couple of times, once whilst on maternity leave. And
how long was your maternity leave?
Well, I've got 3 kids, so I took 3 periods off. So The first time I took 4 months off. Tried to, and the office that I was working at actually closed during that time. It wasn't sustainable, so couldn't sustain me coming back in. So at that point, I went to work for someone else part-time. That went well. It was the boom before the last recession. So I was doing lots of resi,
sort
housing.
Of mid-2000.
Yeah, mid-2000s. So when I took time off to have child number 2, that was good. It was a good environment. There was lots of money around. My skills were valued. So I kind of came back in and sort of picked up nicely after 6 months. And, because I was working in kind of resi master planning, I was like doing front end stuff, sort of planning and master planning. But then as the crash came along in 2008, as the economy was faltering, I took time out to have child number 3. And this time I took a year out, just hoping the economy would recover for when I came back in. But it didn't. And the practice I was working for had kind of gone from resi into other sectors. Well, they'd always been strong in other sectors, sort of education and healthcare. And I was kind of de-skilled, really. So I was like last one in, first one out when they had to make redundancies. So at the time, I tried looking for work in other practices, but it was 2010 and kind of 50% of all architects had lost their jobs. So there was nothing out there.
And was this in Manchester?
This was in Manchester, yeah. So I had no choice but to set up on my own. So that was 2010, set up Raynes Architecture, started just looking around for residential, domestic work, got some, which was great. But whilst I was at my previous job, I'd started getting involved in marketing. Because I could see that I had to find a way of kind of upskilling in a certain area and bringing business in. So I kind of got involved in Women in Property, and I was actually the chair of Women in Property Northwest. So when I lost my job, I was still chair of Women in Property Northwest. So actually it was a really good kind of platform, created a really good profile. I got press out of it. I had stuff to talk about. I launched my own website. I got on Twitter. So it was like the launch. Twitter was new back then, all that social media stuff, and it was all very exciting. And because I was on my own, I kind of had the freedom to talk about whatever I wanted, which was really nice. When you're in a large practice and you can't say anything.
Yeah, you're always kind of worried about.
Yeah, is this the party line? Is this the right thing?
I should always looking over there.
Yeah. So it was a real freedom when I set up on my own, and I kind of enjoyed the website and getting sort of online marketing. So I kind of started getting work, which was nice. Well, actually, not just nice; it was important because I was the breadwinner. So
how did you win those early projects?
Word of mouth.
Right.
Yeah. Start off, it was word of mouth, and then I think I had a lead from a newspaper article. I had a lead from networking, and then sort of web and Twitter and stuff like that.
Right.
But you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to build your portfolio, and it's that beginning bit's quite tricky when you haven't got a portfolio.
Yeah, or you've come from big practice and you've been working on large commercial projects, and suddenly now you're talking to people about extensions and interior renovations, and sometimes it can be a bit of a jump. Yes.
So that was quite tricky to start off with, but it was fine. I was quite comfortable going out and talking to clients once I'd got the leads anyway. Because my background was in residential and listed buildings, it kind of came together quite nicely.
Yeah.
In domestic extensions. And when I went into that market, everyone had kind of tried to scare me off. saying that it was a really hard market to work in. Domestic clients it's very emotional. It's very personal. It's very litigious. And that people just steered clear of it when they could, or as soon as they could.
Yeah.
But I started to enjoy it. And as I got more work in, I started to build my practice. I got some people in to work with me. I started building an office. We went up to 5 people at one time. And I started looking for more commercial work and sort of housing and trying to break back into social housing, into more large scale projects. But I hit a brick wall. Social housing was hard to break into because you had to be on frameworks. If you weren't on frameworks, you had to go and speak to the builders, the contractors who were on the frameworks. And then the contractors actually wanted you to bring them opportunities, so sites. So I started looking for sites. And then, so I'm kind of 18 months, 2 years into that journey, and I found myself kind of just looking for sites and thinking, this isn't what I trained for. It's not my expertise. The sites that we're finding were kind of too old and had been on the market for too long.
And it also becomes quite a lot of your resource being put into doing that. Taking away from what you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's me trying to break into a field or a sector, because I had sort of altruistic ideas, and actually, it's just sending me completely in the wrong direction. And I tried getting into some commercial work, working with some old landlords that I'd worked with before, but one of them went bump. So it fortunately, I kind of only lost about 800 quid.
Yeah.
But that was enough to shock me when I kind of thought I had cash flow. I could see a cash flow from them. So it just kind of completely rocked the business, and I just thought, this isn't sustainable. And I could see the domestic work just coming in nice and steadily. And really predictable. So it's kind of small fees. So if someone doesn't go for a project, it's one of 20. It's not one of 2.
Yeah.
So, it's predictable.
And what were the skills that you were employing that were able to, because it's really interesting that so many architects are looking to leave residential, it's the entry point for lots of practices. And then there's as you say, there's like an attitude sometimes of it's too much drama involved with people's houses, and people, and then you find lots of architects in a kind of permanent transition phase, trying to break into new sectors. So what was it for you that enabled you to create a kind of consistency with the pipeline of residential work?
I think it was when I hit on my kind of concept of a workshop, where I do a paid element of work at relatively low cost, which, and I go back to hand drawings. I'm just thinking whether I've got any to hand. I've got a whole pile of them over there.
We'll take some pictures and we can.
I kind of came across this concept of a workshop. So, so going back a bit, when I go and see my clients for the first time, I take a really detailed brief, and I've got a set list of questions that you must ask. And it's come out from experience, just things that seem a bit daft, but actually are really obvious.
Could you give us an example?
Yeah. So, are you the owner of the property?
Yeah.
For example, one time someone booked in a workshop, so that's your time booked out of your diary. I turned up and they said, who authorised this? And basically I'd been dealing with tenants and not the landlord.
Right.
Tenants were, oh yes, this is what we want. We want to extend. And you're like, actually, who's given you the permission to do it? So it was just a waste of time. What else? Are there any covenants, easements, rights of way? Just nice open questions like, are there any issues with your house? And clients look at me blankly and then go, oh, well, we had a bit of drainage problem, or, there's a bit of cracking or something like that. And you can find out what their perceptions are. Or I always like to find out how much the house cost when they bought it.
Right.
And the current value, how much they've spent. So you can do a cost to value exercise on it. Because I don't believe in putting clients in negative equity. I think it's irresponsible of architects to design something that clients can't afford and won't be able to recoup in the future. Because when you're dealing with domestic houses, it's people's primary investment.
Yeah.
If it's my house or your house, I don't think you'd want to throw 20 grand away on something, sort of flashy that you can't recoup. It's different if you're at the higher end of domestic, at footballers' wives or whatever, when they've got disposable income. But
it seems as there's that kind of middle part of the market, which is, I think you said this to me before, it's traditionally quite underserved or poorly served by architects.
Yeah. And when you speak to clients, architects have a bit of a bad reputation with them. Actually, clients don't know the difference between an architect and a non-architect. Now, this is a big issue in the industry. Lay clients don't know how to recognise an architect. They can be talking to a draftsman and assume that they're an architect, or someone who provides architectural services, and they'll assume they're an architect. So there's an education part to go through. And then also, so some of these people will only do certain parts of the job, maybe do planning drawings. I do keep on coming across other people who serve the market, so not architects or architectural technicians necessarily, who will take a client through planning and then disappear when the planners have questions and want amendments and stuff like that, and they leave the clients high and dry. So there's very little accountability in residential domestic as well. So it could do with being regulated better.
Yeah. And so you start to find yourself having quite a stable pipeline of these types of clients. Yeah. And then you were saying it became something you could actually start to depend on. Like there was a rhythm to it. Yes.
So going back, I kind of explained that I take a really detailed brief.
Right.
And then I do a workshop. So my first pay point is a workshop, and it's either 300 quid for a half day or 500 quid for a full day. And we do hand-drawn drawings in front of the client at that point. And it's brilliant because it engages the client. They understand what you do. They can see your value. You can make sure that they understand the drawings. And I do test my clients. You can test their brief as well, because so often they've got a really fixed idea in the head about what they want. And until you draw it out and show that it's not going to work, they'll always come back to it. So there's usually a pain point in my workshops when you draw something out and go, oh no, it doesn't. And you can see that when you start finding solutions to it. So at the end of the workshop, they come out with a handful of options where they can test the feasibility, whether it's worth the value. And I ask them to do a cost to value exercise. So I ask them to get some costings, whether from a QS or from a builder, and check the value by speaking to an estate agent and speak to neighbours to see if there's going to be any issues. So the clients work through and see for themselves whether it's going to work or not.
Great. So it's really kind of giving them a lot of foresight into all the potential pitfalls of a project, and a real kind of good diagnosis of what's involved, and
at quite an early stage. So they've only committed like the 300 or 500 quid, but then when they convert into a project, that they're in it for the long haul, and there shouldn't be any surprises.
And is this something that a client can say, do this workshop with you, and then they could go to another architect, and they could...
so I'm not precious, because I kind of want clients to be, get good value. I went to see a client yesterday who had planning permission for quite a large extension, but they weren't happy with the internal layout. So I said, look, I can, sit down with you and, we can have a workshop of the internal layout. And then you can go back to the previous architect. Actually, I don't think they were an architect, but you can go back to the previous person to pick it back up again. Because if we were going in with someone else's designs, we'd need to go back and do the survey and draw everything up properly. So there's a lot of time and money against that. And if there's an easier route for the client, then that's fine with us.
Okay, so there's a really nice kind of marketing package almost, or kind of like introductory low cost commitment service that makes it very accessible for people.
That's right.
And is that why you think that the main sort of ingredient to having that consistency? How do you promote that?
Well, I promote it across kind of social media and our website. So we invested quite a lot of money in videos and sort of lots of content explaining how it works on social media platforms. So we've invested quite heavily in marketing. And when clients come to me, they're kind of ready to buy because they've already had a really thorough look through the website and go, yes, they understand what we do and how we do it. So, it's usually just to make sure your face fits, make sure they're kind of happy, and then they're on with it.
Brilliant. And so how did Raynes Architecture then, how did the idea of setting up as a franchise come about? So
I'd started doing this, I think, it was 2010 when I'd set up.
Just do one actually, but you and once you've done that kind of marketing process, you will then go into like a full architectural service. You'll do planning, building regs, tender packages.
No.
No,
we, so once we get the go-ahead from a workshop, our projects then become, it's planning and building regs.
Okay.
And we stop our services at building regs.
Right, okay.
If a client, because our projects are quite small,
they
don't necessarily need contract admin or full specification or, tender. If they do, we kind of refer to a QS, or we can offer some add-on services, but we keep it very light touch.
Yeah.
Reason being is that once a builder's been appointed, the specification always changes. So I've done this a few times in the early stages where we'd do a full spec and then the spec would always change with the builder and be like, there's a huge waste of time and resources.
Did they even look at the drawings?
Yeah, gone into that, and you're like, there's no point, because it's usually, cost is king.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so it's a kind of condensed service.
It is. Yeah.
And that suits the demographic.
Yeah.
Much better as well, rather than. Yeah. I suppose when you're doing those kinds of that kind of scale of projects, as you say, it's unnecessary to go into over details.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And then we're talking about how it became into the franchise.
So I set up back in 2010 as Raynes Architecture, and I think I remember having the idea in 2012 about franchising. So I'd started going to networking groups and business support groups, and someone recommended a book to me, The E-Myth Revisited.
Oh yeah, Michael Gerber.
Michael Gerber. And it really resonated with me, and it's the idea of or the E-myth is that any someone who has a technical skill is an entrepreneur. So it's like saying any doctor or any dentist or any architect that comes out of school with a qualification can set up on their own. And what he challenges it and says, actually, there's a lot more to business than just having that qualification. And it's about the resources and the business skills and the marketing and the support and the admin, etc., etc. So I read that and it kind of struck a chord. And I also thought I could start to see that there was a problem in the industry, in architecture. So because I was chair of Women in Property Northwest, and I'd started getting involved in the RIBA, the Manchester Society of Architects, now Manchester Architects, and the Solo Practitioners Group, that it was very male-dominated, that women were really struggling to set up on their own. There were very few women at senior positions. When I was working in practice, there were very few women. And then I started to see the stats as well. At uni now, there's a 50-50 split between men and women. But at the ARB, only 25% are female. At the RIBA, there's only 17.5% of chartered members are female. And you can see it in practice, and you can see it with all the gender pay gap studies. And I'd met, a fair few people who've kind of stepped out of the industry to have kids and just not gone back in. So I'd found a business model. And bearing in mind that I was breadwinner and had 3 kids, I was, running a house and, looking after them as well. And I'd found a nice business model that worked around a kind of it was like a lifestyle business. Yeah. I wasn't at my computer 24/7. I could take days off and go and pick up the kids, or, take holidays. I can actually take holidays. And with the problem in the industry, put 2 and 2 together and just thought, well, if I replicated what I did, then, I can help lots of people. So that was the kind of the gem of the idea.
The light bulb went off.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, I've got a solution. There's a problem. Right.
So how does it work? What are so for people who perhaps haven't read the E-Myth, he talks a lot about systemization of businesses and how that's the real sort of key, and they often refers to Ray Kroc and McDonald's as an example of how to systematize something quite complex and make it so that anybody can do it. So what's the kind of process that you've gone through in systematizing an architectural practice?
Well, it's things like the brief. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's like writing it down, putting it in a single spreadsheet. So it's like a 1 A4 spreadsheet to fill out when you go and see a client. Ask the same questions every single time. And then, the process is you take a photo of it, you email it to the client so you've got a record, and you go through. So every stage of the project has a process associated with it.
Right, okay. So like a sort of series of checks and systems.
Yeah, and it's from, standing up in a networking meeting and presenting some flyers. It's the same flyer. It's the same presentation. Well, it's not the same presentation. It's a personal thing, but we talk about it. We develop them together. We've got a certain style, how we talk on the internet, on Facebook. We've got a common sort of branding language, use of fonts, what we talk about. In fact, I'm just developing some brand guidelines. I've just had built a CRM system for our clients, which I'm about to roll out. We've always used sort of like software to integrate stuff. We've got an online booking diary that then moves nice and swiftly through into MailChimp to provide automated emails. So our clients consistently get touch points,
So could you explain what a franchise is?
So, a franchise is like McDonald's, where anyone can go and buy a McDonald's restaurant, and they're given an operations manual of how to actually run the business. But it's got everything. It's really prescriptive. It's about, where do you source your meat from? Where the uniforms from, what do you say when you answer the phone or, drive through a drive-through, how, you talk to the customers, the level of absolutely everything is written down, so that everyone offers the same service. It's not the same meal, but it's, it tastes the same.
Yeah. It's like regulating that consistency.
Yeah. And what we do, we don't, we don't have a pattern book of designs. Every single client is different. I've been doing this for 8 years now, and every single client is different, even though the majority of our houses are kind of 1930s semis or Victorian terraces, and they're very similar layouts. They're not exactly the same. They're different sites, different councils, different clients. And, there's always something slightly different. But the process is the same.
And what about, are there sort of systems for sales and for marketing and for how to, so what kind of people come to you and buy a franchise? So
I've got 2 franchisees plus myself at the moment.
Right.
Magda is in Manchester, so she operates the Manchester South area. She's a young mum, like me, although I'm not necessarily that young anymore. She came to me actually a few years ago and said, how do you carry on? How do you practice being an architect when you've got kids? I think she just had a first or was about to, and was looking at me and just went, how do you do it? So I took her under my wing and she shadowed me. And she became my pilot franchisee and then signed up. And now she's absolutely flourishing. It's amazing. She's really confident. And a fantastic architect as well. Clients love her.
Yeah. So what is it that they get, and how does it operate for you? Do you still, like say McDonald's?
Yeah.
When they sell a franchise, they make some sort of money up front from selling the systems.
Yes.
And they also have some sort of control in kind of overseeing that those systems are being implemented properly.
Yeah.
And they'll also have some sort of revenue.
Yeah.
So do you have that same sort of model?
Yeah. So at the moment, our price points are 15 grand for a territory outside the Northwest, 10 grand for a territory within the Northwest. I've split the country up into about 100 territories. It's been mapped via demographics and geography. And it works across the UK.
So once somebody's purchased a sort of franchise system from you, how are you still making revenue? From the profits of their projects as well, or there's like a revenue share.
Yeah, so someone buys the franchise for, say, 15 grand. Funding is available. I've actually agreed with NatWest. They, because the idea of franchises is so commonplace and it's a business model. It's a proven business model, and that's the key to it. Yeah. It's a proven business model with a track record. You can go to a bank and get funding against it, and NatWest have recently approved Pride Road, which is fantastic.
So it's actually easier to get a bank loan or support with one of your
a franchise, because across the industry, across the UK, it's about 90% of all franchises succeed. You know, whereas
which is massive difference from
if you're setting up on your own. I mean, what are the figures for starting up a new business?
It's appalling. Like 5% or something
succeed.
Yeah,
it's just crazy. So franchising is a proven model. NatWest will support it. So okay, let's talk about you. Say you were to come and buy a franchise business. Whereabouts do you live?
In Romford.
Romford. Okay.
East London.
Fine.
Essex.
So I could sell you the Romford territory.
Right.
We'd map out where the boundary is. You'd pay 15 grand. You'd get some funding from NatWest. You'd also need some capital to get started for the first 6 months. You break even after about 6 months.
Right. Okay.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Anyway, from that, you would sign a franchise agreement with me for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then you'd get all my systems. We'd stick you on the website. We'd start doing lots of marketing for you, and then we'd say, right, here's your PR piece, go and get some PR. And obviously you'd be doing the work, but we'd give you templates to go and set you up, and you'd start getting leads through. And then you give us 10% of your turnover,
right,
on a monthly basis, plus a marketing levy.
Great.
Okay. And that's how it works. And I suppose because as a franchisee, you have your mentorship, all the time, which for somebody when you're setting up, particularly architects setting up by themselves, if there isn't a mentor, or you're kind of just going into something blindly, the amount of time that can save. Yeah. It's also, I think, what my feedback that I've had is having an instant portfolio, because you can use our body of work to go and promote yourself in Romford. Here's a 1930s house extension, here's a Victorian semi, here's a detached property that we've done. and you can use the we for Pride Road.
Yeah.
You've got that business model that you know that you're going to be earning within 6 months. As long as you follow what we say and put the time in. It's not excessive. It's just, kind of full time, but flexible.
Yeah.
It will come good. And we start off with a 10-day training program, which is kind of all aspects of business with me and my team. And then there's kind of weekly support as you get started. And then we have franchise development days once every 2 months.
Right.
So, and we, either have CPDs or share, I'll update them on something, or we'll share experiences. And it's really good. Catherine is over in Liverpool. She joined us about 18 months ago, and she's thriving too. And it's just great. It's great that I've set it up and it works. So I can see it working now.
So what's the future? What's next? How are you? Well, if say I've got people here listening, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you? Because I know there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast who would be either thinking about setting up a business, or they're in the early throes of it and kind of feeling quite lost. Or
well, I've got a website, prideroadfranchise.co.uk,
right,
and there's a lot of resources on there. So have a look through that and get in contact if you want to have a chat.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And so for the future for you, what's the next sort of few years?
I really need to recruit more people.
Yeah.
I've got a very big engine running a little dinghy at the moment.
Yeah.
And I've personally put in a lot of investment and kind of money into this. So, as a business person, I need to see this grow and actually provide some return on investment. So I need people to come and work for us with us.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So growing it into a nationwide company.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I'm aiming towards kind of like three new franchisees a year. To grow it, I don't know, to 20, 30 franchisees to start off with, and then see what happens.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed speaking with you.
It's a pleasure.
So that is a wrap. Thank you for listening. The views expressed on this show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract bond, or commitment, except to help you be unstoppable.